Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rembach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who's really going to give us some practical application to building better and stronger and higher performing teams. Douglas Gerber was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. He's got an older brother and a younger sister and an 80-year-old mother still driving her Subaru around the hills of Portland. He has an MBA from Thunderbird School of Global Management and is a certified professional facilitator and professional coach. Douglas has always been fascinated by cultures and languages, and during his teenage years, tasted life in France and Europe, and later in Latin America and Asia. That gave him the language bug, and he ended up studying and speaking 8 languages. These experiences have also made him keenly aware of how cultures and groups of people think and interact. He has extended this awareness to business teams and discovered a talent and passion for supporting teams to perform at their best. In 2003, after a successful 20-year corporate career, culminating as a vice president for PepsiCo, Douglas left to start his own consulting firm, Focus One. He wanted to share the benefit of what had worked so effectively for him by teaching other organizations how to build high-performance teams. His transition into this field actually began 10 years earlier when he had attended a corporate leadership program conducted by Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, one of the fathers of executive coaching. After reviewing his personality assessment and several discussions, Marshall challenged him with, "Douglas, what are you doing in corporate? Everything I see from your assessment shows that you'd be a great executive coach." At that time, he laughed off Marshall's prodding, but his encouragement must have remained in the back of his mind because years later, Douglas found his niche as a leadership team coach, encouraging leadership teams to commit to achieving high performance. Douglas's mission is to help teams experience the fulfillment, thrill, and exhilaration of working in a high-performance team. Just as a winning sports team shares a compelling identity, so can a business team. Douglas currently lives in Hong Kong. He's married with 2 lovely daughters and 1 baby in the oven. And he is the author of Team Quotient, high-performance leadership teams that win every time. Douglas Gerber, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I am ready, Jim.
I'm glad you're here. And I'm really excited at the discussion that we're getting ready to get into. But I've given my Legion a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Well, I really have 2 passions, Jim. One is, as you, in the introduction, you talked about, all the countries I've lived in. So, my philosophy is if you live in a country, you need to understand the people. And if you want to understand people, you have to speak the language. So I've learned all these languages. And so that's my first passion is languages. My second passion is working with teams and helping them move from a sense of me to we. That magic transition where the team moves from self-centered and concept to a concept of collective. So that's my current passion.
Well, and gosh, I've really enjoyed, and so for me, just to kind of give everybody an insight into how this works for me, is I do a deep scan of books that I have the opportunity to interview authors for. And in your particular book, man, I just found myself wanting to sit there and read page by page. And so I am going to do that. I don't do that for every single book. I will be doing that for yours. And I think I just learned so much about how to practically put together a high-performing team, and there's so much insight in here. But I think it's really important for us to start with the definition of Team Quotient and Team Q, because there's really 2 different types of TQ that you're talking about. In the book, you talk about a collective team TQ, which is that team's ability to operate as a high-performance team, and then you talk about personal TQ, so it's that individual component. So when you start, you also have a table in here that talks about where people typically focus their time, effort, and activity, and very little of it is actually going to the team environment. Tell us about that.
Yeah, let me just get started by, we all know about IQ and we all know about EQ. They've been around for a long time. But I realized there was something missing in the arsenal, the leader's arsenal, and that's something called TQ, or Team Quotient. And after investigating this, I realized that nobody had actually investigated Team Quotient. So I ended up trademarking it. So it's trademarked in 4 continents around the world. And the idea is that Team Quotient is the intelligence of the team. How well does it work together? And unlike, the individual, so IQ or EQ, which is personal, with TQ, it's both personal as well as collective. So that's why we have the personal TQ and the collective TQ. Personal TQ says, what's my propensity to work in a team? And collective TQ says, how is the team working together? And so there's a score, just like IQ score. There's a TQ score. The team receives a score, and then it's aspirational, saying, how do you move forward in the future? So that's the concept of TQ. And what I found is that you actually need to measure a team for the team to be able to get its hands around its team journey.
So talking about that, that team journey, I think you also referred to something that we're going to talk about in a little bit, talking about the state of where that is.
Yeah.
And so talking about the imperative and the breakdown of where people actually invest their time and energy is in personal development. For that, time and effort, it's typically 40 to 70%. In people development, it's typically 20 to 40%. And then in team development, prior to actually starting on their TQ and high performance development journey, it's about 5 to 15%. However, in order to really do what you were talking about from a team perspective, that team development after embarking on the journey and the leader's time and energy goes to 30 to 40%. And you talk about many of the reasons for that and then the benefits that are apparent. But what do you see really coming out of that that's most impactful?
Well, I think the leaders, unfortunately, have been misguided here, because leaders spend a lot of time talking about, my own personal leadership or how I lead people, or vision or strategy, and very little on how do I lead a team. So, this whole area of team development, leaders may spend 10 to 20% on it. But actually, they should be spending 40 to 50% on it, because it's the team that will make the leader successful. The leader can only do so much. And if the leader doesn't have a great team, then he or she will be limited. So that's why the imperative is. The imperative is that the leaders need to spend time on their teams. Now, why don't they do that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is ignorance. They don't know the power of a high-performance team. Secondly, it's not easy to build a team, as any leader knows. I often ask people, in my seminars, how many of you are married, or how many of you have long-term partners? People raise their hands and say, is marriage easy? People would say, no, marriage is definitely not easy. Well, if you're in a team of 10 people, just multiply that by 10, and now we know what the difficulty is. So it's not easy building a high-performance team, but it is imperative. And so that's what we do. We demystify this whole area of how you build it and how you do it.
Well, and in addition, as you're talking, and I start thinking about all of that complexity and thinking about the magnification of it, because I have, multiple individuals that I'm now having to be married to, essentially. Of course, now we know about the whole divorce issue, right, and how that comes into play. But it kind of, for me, I can see how the whole energy issue is really impacted. So if I'm not putting energy into all of those relationships and helping them to work as a collective, it's going to end in divorce.
That's right. Absolutely. And that's why, as a team leader, if you just let your team sort of go on its own, you don't put the energy into it, you're going to have people leaving, or you're going to have people who are disconnected. One of the big buzzwords, of course, is engagement. So if you want to get a team that's engaged, you have to spend time on it. You have to pay attention to the team.
So another thing that I found really interesting here is you talk about lessons from team sports and applying them to business. And there's 8 things that you have identified as far as successful sports teams, and what they do and what allows them to be successful. And you talk about mutual reliance, challenge to do your best, awareness, identity and pride, trust, confidence, success and performance, motivation and fun, and then coaches encourage team commitment. Now, one of the things that when I was looking at this, and I was like, does this have some gender tendency to it? Because it seems like very male type qualities as a whole.
Yeah, it's an interest. I never thought of it that way. It's an interesting thing. I don't think that there's a gender issue around building teams. Let me give you one reason why. We take up the whole area of fun, and some people say, well, why are you talking about fun in teams? I'm going to back up and just say that I was working with a European team, and the Swiss guy got up and said, I said we should have a break. This is getting kind of heavy, and he says, why would we need a break? This is all business. We're not supposed to have fun. and I said, well, that's interesting. And everybody else wanted to have some fun. So the idea is that to build a team, you have to challenge the team. You have to get people engaged, and you need to have some fun. And if you're not doing that, you're not going to build a high performance team. So I would say fun is not a masculine thing or a feminine thing, but fun is something that's actually really critical that people miss in that whole environment. Now, let's relate it back to sports. People who are playing sports and great sports teams, they'll tell you that we have so much fun playing these sports, and it is so challenging, and there's so much energy and juice, and that's the feeling you want on a business team or a corporate team as well.
Well, and for me, you're talking about business and corporate team. I'm thinking about this at teams at all levels, at the front line level. I mean, especially when you one of the issues that you have about the front line for a lot of organizations is the higher turnover rates. Well, heck, you have that at an executive level now too. But then the other thing is, I'm thinking about this as a generational issue. We didn't have to talk about the whole dysfunctional and self-absorption piece as much as we have done with the advent of the whole, devices that we now can sink ourselves into and lose ourselves into. So, to me, it seems like it's becoming significantly harder to build stronger teams because everybody's connection. Yeah,
that's absolutely true. And I think with it, there's some wonderful things that have come out of the internet age. But, one of them that has not come out of it is that sense of face-to-face connectivity. So, and this actually gets into this incredible area, which will be very important in the 2020s as teams become more virtual. And so we're seeing more and more virtual teams. And so what I say to people is that, look, if you're going to have a virtual team, try to get together at least once a year, because that face-to-face connection is essential. And maybe you can do it more than once a year. Maybe it's 2 times a year or 4 times a year. But at least once a year, get together. That will make a huge difference in terms of the whole connectivity of the team.
It's interesting that you say that, because I just had this conversation with one of my coachees yesterday, talking about the power of proximity.
Yep.
And that if you're working and leading a remote team where everybody's dispersed in different areas, that you still have to pay attention to the power of proximity, and you just have to do certain things to replace, your face-to-face connections.
Yeah, and absolutely. And, so part of this is we're on video here. So video is a lot better than audio, obviously. So where possible, use video. And where possible, use life-size video, even better. But if you only have audio, there are certain things you can do. So one of them is that, hey, you got to get to know each other. Share photos of your kids, of your holidays. Spend a little bit of time at the beginning of the meeting talking about some personal things to make sure those connections are there. Because what happens is that people naturally will go into the tasks in their business when they're talking on the phone. They go right into the tasks, right? So, and what you really want to do is the opposite. You want to spend a little bit of time on the personal side, because that's going to keep the team together.
It's funny that you say that. I that's one of the things that I coach all the time, is that people want to get on the phone and like, okay, we have a lot to do, so let's get to it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's just the wrong thing to do. It's the opposite.
Yeah, it actually makes things more difficult to get done.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so needless to say, you talked about assessing the team and all of that, and you do have that in the book. You talk about the collective quotient health check, and you have it for the team, and then you also have it for the individual. And then you can total up your score, and then you mentioned something about the aspirational components of trying to increase your health check score. And that ultimately leads to something that you call the TQ Mango.
Okay, so yeah, I'd just like to say that when you do the assessment, one of the things I found, there are a lot of assessments out there, and some of them are very complicated. You can do this TQ health check online, confidential. Everybody in the team takes it. It takes less than 10 minutes. So it's easy, and it's easy to get 100% of the team members, involved in that. And then you get your score, and you get a diagnosis of what's working, what's not working, your areas to improve. But so the starting point, this gets into the starting point. So are you a dysfunctional team? Are you a mediocre team? Or are you a high performance team? So that's the TQ Mango. And at the bottom is this dysfunctional team. And I get a lot of dysfunctional teams. These are people who don't talk to one another. This is what I call a team in a state of warfare. And believe it or not, there are a lot of teams like that, where you have different cliques, there's backbiting, people are not getting along. I actually love working with those teams, because to see them transform is very satisfying. So the next level up on the Mango, and this is where most teams are, this is sort of mediocre teams. And mediocre teams are sort of ho-hum. The problem with mediocre teams is that you get stuck in a rut, and you just keep going on as a mediocre team. Now, one of the key characteristics of mediocre teams is what we call silo mentality. So we all know what silos are. Silos are those big cylinders, right? So silo mentality is when people come to the meeting saying, I represent my area, I represent my department, and I'm here to win. I'm here to win my concepts, my arguments, get my budgets approved, etc. That's silo mentality. So moving from silo mentality to team first. And that's the shift that we're trying to make. So most teams that are in the mediocre area are in that silo mentality. You have a group of individuals coming together, but they're not a real team. That's a mediocre team. And then the high performance team, which is, by the way, only 5% of teams are high performance teams. It takes a lot of work. The high performance teams are ones that they do think about the team first. You have that sense of energy. You have that sense of passion. People, they're not in competition. They're actually supporting one another. A lot of some leaders will actually say, "Oh, I like my team members to compete with each other a little bit." But actually, what you want is people supporting each other, not fighting each other. And that feeling you get in being a high performance team is unlike any other feeling out there. It is something that once you experience a high performance team, you never want to go back. Like a sports team, championship sports team. If you ask anybody on a championship sports team, what's that like? They said, there's nothing like it. Same thing in a business or corporate team.
It's funny that you say that. I mean, I was talking about sports, and you'll hear team members say, "I love these people." Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and it's the same thing with when you're on a high performance team. Here's this concept of identity, team identity. So in other words, when you go to work every day, you're driving to work and you're thinking, "Oh, I'm going to go see all my team members." Are you excited about that? Are you proud about that? Are you saying, "Oh no, I have to go see my team members"? So it's really, it's that sense of identity that you're excited to be with your team members, because it is challenging and it is motivational. It is something that keeps you going, and that's what you want in a high performance team.
So, gosh, when I'm thinking about all of this particular effort and activity and all of that, I start thinking about that need for inspiration that you talk about. And one of the things that we focus in on the show are quotes to do that. In the book, you have tons of excellent quotes, because it's loaded with a lot of case studies. And so for me, when I started thinking about this particular book, I'm like, okay. Good to Great is a book that has sold millions of copies. But one of the things about this book that is even better is that it gives you the case studies and then how to do it.
Yeah. And in fact, I actually call this book the Leader's Operating Manual for Building High Performance Teams. So it's the not only what are you achieving, but it's the how to. One of the things I say to leaders, don't make this too complicated. If you only pick, you've got tons of ideas in this book, and you have a roadmap. But if you only take two or three of those ideas and you implement them well with your team, you're going to make a lot of progress. So don't feel you have to go all the way. Keep it simple.
Well, another thing, too, is I started thinking about all of this work, and we're going to get to your favorite quote in a second, because, again, there's so many things in this book I want to talk about, is that I see that not having this problem with dysfunction and being average and not being high-performing also ultimately affects two important things these days, and that is the employee experience, and then even more importantly, the customer experience. So if you don't have a high-performing team, the customer is the victim.
Absolutely. And I actually want to tell you a story about that, because I was working with a team in Singapore, and they were on the lowest quartile of customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction. This team, there was a lot of stars on the team, but they weren't working together well. We did a program, and a year later they came back, and they had actually shifted that whole thing around to be on the top quartile of customer satisfaction and employee satisfaction. So high performance teams have a huge impact on employee engagement, satisfaction, and the whole customer piece. Because you're not high performance if you can't have great customers and you don't know how to work with your customers.
Without a doubt. Okay, so favorite quote. You got to inspire us here. I know you have several probably, but if you can share one or two with us, I think that would be fantastic.
Well, my favorite quote is, leaders are only as good as the teams they build. So, you can think you're a great leader, but if you can't build a great team, you ain't a great leader. And that's what I really believe. And when I talk to leaders and I say, you're really bright, you're a good strategy guy, or you're really good at motivating people, but if you can't build your team, then you're really not a great leader. So that's my favorite quote, and that kind of sums up how I think about this whole area of team transformation. And by the way, I don't talk about team building so much. I don't try to build teams. It's about team transformation. So it's not like a one-off event that you do. It's about a year to 3 years to create a transformation in this team. And just like a sports team, you don't build a sports team in, a couple weeks. It takes years to build a championship sports team. Same thing with business and corporate teams.
Well, and that's why you call it a TQ journey, right? They're going on their journey. Even when you started talking about the mango and you explain in the book, you talk about, them being in a state of where they are in the mango.
Yeah. And one of the things that happens, and you ask, almost everybody's been through this experience, you go on a team building day, right? You do a ropes course or you do something fun and everybody's having a good time. You get back to the office. What happens? Nothing. Nothing happens. Everybody goes back to their old habits. So this is why we don't call it team building. We call it team transformation, because what we're trying to do is to transform teams throughout their whole, working life. And when they go back to the office, that they actually are transforming through that experience.
Well, talking about transforming, talking about learning all those languages, living all those different places, all the different case studies you've been through, family, all of that. I mean, I know you've had humps to get over it, and they've helped you get to where you are today. But can you share one of those stories with us so that we can learn from you?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to when I was a vice president in PepsiCo, and I think the story there was we had a high performance individual named John, and John was managing a region, and he came to me and he said, "Douglas, I've got some bad news for you." Now, if you're in Pepsi and somebody says, "I've got bad news for you," what do you think? You're going to think one thing: the guy's going to Coke. Sure enough, he says, "Oh, Douglas, I'm getting a promotion, general manager of Coke." And I said, "Oh, John, no, I know you can't leave. You can't leave. He's a great guy." So I went back to the HR person, Linda, and Linda is saying, "Oh, no, we can." 6 months later, we've got the similar job for him. So go back to John again. I said, "John, 6 months, you're going to be a GM for PepsiCo." So he said, "Oh no, Douglas, I still want to go." And then so go. So why else? What is it? He says, "Oh, salary, 30% salary increase." So go back to Linda, 30% salary increase. She says, "No problem, we can do that." Back to John, and John says, "One last thing, Douglas, I don't have a PA." And I said, "Well, that's not a problem. I can get you a PA. I don't need to talk to Linda about that. But Douglas, I don't want any PA. I want your PA." Do you think I was going to give John my PA? No way. And then, so the question is, did John leave? Yes, he left. And was it because of my PA? No. The reason John left, and I found out through talking to Jerry, who, went deeper with John felt that he was not really part of a team. He felt that, he was, he's a high potential guy, and he knew that. But he didn't feel that sense of identity, camaraderie, and energy challenge of a team. So those were my early days in PepsiCo, and I vowed never again to let that happen. So those were actually the days, that was about starting 20 years ago, I started putting a lot of attention on how do you create high-performance teams. And in the 5 years that I was, actually a vice president of PepsiCo, I never lost one team member. We got some promotions, but never lost one team member. So, that was something that was very instructional for me. And, one of the things that people had said to me, because in PepsiCo you have a lot of turnover, they said, how'd you do that? And I said, well, I really focused on the team. And I really focused on making sure that people were happy and motivated and stimulated in this team environment.
And when you said, so many things started running through my mind when you started talking about that, and how it really affected that whole turnover component. And, we often talk about how important community is, that we all say that we need and need to have the feeling and sensation of being part of something that's much bigger than ourselves. And that applies everywhere.
Yeah. The sense of belonging, is a need that we all have, and unfortunately, sometimes we go to work and we don't have that sense of belonging. That sense that we're part of a community, and that community is our team. We might get that with our family. We might get that, from a spiritual perspective, but at work, a lot of people, they just don't feel that, and it really corresponds to a basic need that we all have.
Well, in addition to that, I see when you talk about the work of today and going forward, this is just going to continue to grow, is that it's about teamwork. It is about teamwork. Very little of it is really about individual contributor anymore. It's all about even individual contributors working as a collective.
Yeah, that's right. Just think of a company. A company is, what is a company? A company is a series of teams. There might be 10 teams, there might be 1,000 teams. But a company is actually a series of teams. And it's the team unit where you can really make things happen. And so as a leader of that team, it's your imperative to create the best team environment you can. And so you're absolutely right. And I think this is why people spend too much time on the individual leader aspect and not enough time on the collective aspect.
Well, man, so when I start thinking about the work that you're doing with TQ, you said you've actually, trademarked and all of that in a couple different countries. And I see a lot of benefit that could be derived by organizations to use this work. But when you start thinking about, goals and all of that, I said, what is one of your goals that you have?
One of my goals, Jim, is actually to get people to start thinking about teams and team development just like they would any other development. So the idea of Team Quotient. Let's take this whole team thing and measure it. Let's benchmark it. And let's take this as one of the most important things that we need to do. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I truly believe that, if you have high performance teams, people are going to be happier. They're going to be more fulfilled at work. And it really is a formula for happiness, because think about the experience of working in a team like that. You're going to be very motivated, and so I think that for me, that's one of my missions is to help people transform and fulfill through the team environment and experience.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best.
Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better.
All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the
Hump Day Hoedown.
Okay, Douglas, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Douglas Gerber, are you ready to hoe down?
I'm ready to hoe down.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
What's holding me back from being an even better leader today is creating that sense of true leadership throughout the world, on a global sense.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Best leadership advice I've ever received is that pay attention to your people. Your people make you successful.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
One of my secrets is having great emotional intelligence and really understanding where people are coming from and being sensitive to the dynamics of team environments.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
One of my best tools is to, when we're having meetings, getting people to talk about their personal lives before they start talking about business.
And what would be one book that you recommend to our Legion? It could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to Team Quotient on your show notes page as well.
Well, Good to Great is, you mentioned that before, Good to Great was very inspiring. And before I started, this is interesting, before I came up with the name Team Quotient, I was actually thinking the name should be Good to Great Teams. but I wanted something a little bit more unique.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Douglas Gerber. Okay, Douglas, this is my last hump day hold-on question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25. You can take all the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take it all back. You can only take one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
I would definitely take back the skill and knowledge of building a high-performance team. And the reason why is that I now realize that that's the key to success.
Douglas, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Yes, you can contact me at douglasgerber.com. It's my website. And I'd love to be in touch with you. Send me an email. I try to answer all my emails and be in touch.
Douglas Gerber, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and the Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump.
Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.